My wife's father handed me a letter from a lawyer and said, "You're out in 72 hours. The house goes to your brother-in-law now." I stood there, hammer still in my hand, drywall dust on my boots, and nodded. "All right," I said, calm as a still pond. But when my brother-in-law walked through that door, he learned what happens when you take a man's work and call it yours. My name is Ethan. I'm 34, the guy who builds things, fixes things, holds things together. If a roof leaks at midnight, I'm the one with the tarp. If the car dies, I'm under the hood with a flashlight. I'm a carpenter, self-taught, running a small crew for remodels around Portland, Oregon. I pay my bills, keep my tools sharp, and don't ask for much. For 6 years, I've lived in the guest cottage behind my in-laws' property, a 1920s Craftsman I rebuilt from the studs up. My wife Sarah is 32. She's the dreamer, the one with Pinterest boards and big ideas. Her brother Nate is 36, the golden boy who talks fast and delivers late. He's the one they bet on. Always. I grew up in a small town outside Eugene where my dad ran a hardware store. He'd say, "Men don't whine, Ethan, they work." I took that to heart. Maybe too much. At 16, I was fixing fences for neighbors. At 20, I was framing houses. After Sarah and I got married, her parents offered us the cottage for cheap rents, even $100 a month when market rate was $1,800. It was a deal. But the place was a wreck. Moldy walls, a sagging porch, wiring that sparked if you looked at it wrong. I told them I'd fix it up, pay rent, and cover materials. They nodded like I'd offered to mow their lawn. I learned plumbing from YouTube, rewired circuits with a borrowed code book, and replaced every window. I kept a spreadsheet. Dates, costs, hours. $22,400 in materials over 5 years. 600 hours of labor, give or take. Every nail I drove felt like a promise to Sarah, to her family, to myself. Sarah's parents, Tom and Diane, lived in the main house, a sprawling 4-bedroom they'd bought in the 1980s. Tom's a retired accountant, practical but soft on his kids. Diane's the heart, always baking, always smoothing things over. Nate, their son, lived in Seattle, chasing startup dreams that never landed. He'd show up every few months, charm everyone, and leave a trail of unpaid tabs. Sarah adored him. "He's figuring it out," she'd say, like it was a prayer. I'd nod, but I saw the pattern. Nate got the spotlight. I got the toolbox. The cottage became my proof of worth. I tore out the rotten subfloor, laid oak planks, and built a kitchen island Sarah loved. I'd come home from a 10-hour job, then spend 3 more hours on the cottage. Sarah would bring me coffee and say, "It's amazing, Ethan." That kept me going. But little things piled up. Tom would call, "Property taxes spiked. Can you chip in $400? Diane would text, "The main house needs a new water heater, $600. I paid, thinking it was family. I sent $1,200 for a new fence when theirs rotted. I fixed their garage door when it jammed. My spreadsheet grew. But I didn't show it to anyone. Felt petty, like I was keeping score in a marriage. Nate was different. He'd roll in with stories about investors and disruptive apps. Tom would clap his shoulder. Diane would make his favorite lasagna. Once he borrowed $2,000 from me for a pitch deck that never materialized. "Next month," he said. I didn't chase him. Sarah said, "He's trying." I let it go. I was the guy who held the line, like my dad taught me. Last spring, things shifted. Tom started talking about legacy planning. He'd sit at the kitchen table, sorting papers, muttering about estate taxes. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" He'd wave me off. "Just organizing." Sarah got quiet too, spending hours on her phone. I figured it was wedding planning. She wanted a vow renewal for our 5th anniversary. Nate started visiting more, always with his fiancée, Chloe, who wore yoga clothes and talked about manifesting wealth. I'd watch them at dinner. Nate promising Tom a big return on some crypto deal, Chloe nodding like it was gospel. My jaw would tighten, but I'd eat my potatoes and stay quiet. In April, the main house's roof started leaking. Tom asked me to handle it. I got quotes, hired a crew, and chipped in $1,500 when the bill came to $4,000. Sarah said, "You're saving us." I believed her. Then Nate pitched turning the main house into an Airbnb. "Passive income," he said, like it was his idea. Tom ate it up. Diane said, "Nate's got vision." I pointed out the zoning laws and renovation costs. Nate smirked. "You're so practical, Ethan," like it was an insult.
The letter came on a Tuesday in June. I just finished patching a crack in the cottage's foundation. My hands smelled like concrete. I walked into the main house to return Tom's level. The kitchen smelled like Diane's lemon pound cake. Sarah sat at the table, eyes on her phone. Tom stood by the sink holding a manila envelope. Diane folded a napkin, then folded it again. "Ethan," Tom said, "sit down." I sat. Sarah didn't look up. Tom slid the envelope across the table. "You're out in 72 hours, he said, voice like he was reading a script. "The house goes to Nate now." My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step. Sarah glanced at me, then away. Diane whispered, "It's for the family's future." I looked at the letter. Deed transfer signed last week. Eviction notice stamped by a notary. Nate's name in bold. "Why?" I asked, voice steady but thin. Tom cleared his throat. "Nate's got plans. The Airbnb thing, it's an investment," Sarah added. "It's not personal, Ethan. It's just timing." I stared at the table, at a scratch I'd sanded out last year. My mouth moved before my brain. "All right," I said. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because it was easier than screaming. No one spoke. The fridge hummed. A fly buzzed against the window. I stood, placed the level on the counter, and walked out. The cottage smelled like sawdust and my own sweat. I sat on the couch I'd reupholstered and opened my spreadsheet. $22,400 in materials, $6,700 in family contributions, for taxes, repairs, bills, 5 years of rent, $42,000 total, always on time. I'd rebuilt their asset, and now it was Nate's. I called Sarah. She didn't answer. I texted, "Can we talk?" She replied, "Busy. It's done." Nate sent a winking emoji. I didn't sleep. I made coffee at 3 in the morning and canceled my Hulu subscription, like I was already packing. The next morning, Tom knocked. "We'll help you move," he said, like I begged for it. "Don't touch my stuff," I said, sharper than I meant. He blinked, then left. I pulled out my lease, a one-page document I'd signed with Tom's LLC, set up for tax purposes. $700 a month, auto-renewing. 60 days notice required. Oregon law was clear. No-cause evictions were banned in Portland for fixed-term leases. I had rights. I printed the lease, my spreadsheet, and every receipt I could find. I wasn't angry yet, just clear, like I'd woken up from a long nap. Friday, they called a family meeting. Nate and Chloe were there, acting like landlords already. Diane brought pound cake. Tom wore his serious flannel. Sarah sat next to Nate, not me. I wore my work jeans, sawdust in the seams. Nate started clapping his hands. "Okay, smooth transition. Ethan, you can stay month to month, $1,800 rent. We'll scale up the Airbnb later." Tom nodded. Diane said, "It's fair." I looked at the cake, untouched, and said, "No." Nate laughed. "No to what?" I slid my folder across the table. "No to eviction. I have a lease through October. It's legal. Check the LLC papers. Tom, you signed as manager. I signed as tenant. 60 days notice, minimum. Oregon law bans no-cause evictions." Nate's smirk faded. Chloe scrolled her phone. Sarah's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You're making this hard," she said. "I'm making it true," I said. I pushed the receipts forward. $22,400 in materials, $6,700 in bills I covered. I rebuilt this place. You don't get to take it and charge me market rent. Tom stood. "This is family. Ethan, don't make it ugly." I stood too. "You made it ugly when you served me papers." Sarah's voice cracked. "We thought you understand." I looked at her, my throat tight. "I understand. I just don't agree." Nate tried a new tack, softer. "Look, we'll give you until August, $1,200 rent. Fair?" I shook my head. $700 per the lease or we go to court. Chloe muttered about legal fees. I said, "I've got a lawyer friend who will do it pro bono." I didn't, but they didn't know that. I walked back to the cottage, heart pounding, but head clear. That night my phone lit up. 6 calls from Tom, 4 from Diane, 2 from Sarah, 1 from Nate. I let them go to voicemail. Sarah texted, "Please, Ethan, let's talk." I replied, "Email me." I washed my dishes slow like I had time to burn. The next morning, Nate emailed, "We'll extend to September, $1,200 rent." I forwarded my lease and wrote,
Vacating October 31st per lease. Rent stays $700. Communications in writing. My hands didn't shake.
The real trouble started a week later. The main house's HVAC failed during a heat wave. Tom called. "Can you look at it?" I said, "Call a tech." He hung up. Sarah texted, "The water bill's late. $200. I replied, "Not my bill." I felt sick, but free. I started packing tools in crates, clothes in bags. I listed my workbench on Craigslist for $150. A guy named Mike picked it up, said, "Solid piece." I said, "Yeah." The city inspector came for the annual rental check. I let him into the cottage. He nodded, impressed. "You've kept it tight." Then he checked the main house. Failed. Loose deck railing, faulty smoke detector, and the attic insulation was moldy from a leak I'd warned Tom about last year. He taped a yellow notice to the door. 15 days to fix. I heard Nate upstairs yelling, "This wasn't in the plan." Sarah called, voice shaky, "Can you meet the inspector for the recheck? You know the house." I emailed, "Hire a contractor. I'm not the landlord." 2 weeks later, the kitchen sink in the main house backed up. I told Tom the drain line was old, needed replacing. He said, "Later." Now water pooled on the floor. Sarah knocked on my door, eyes red. "Can you fix it for us?" I said, "Call a plumber. I told you about the line in March." She cried. I felt like a jerk, but held my ground. The plumber's bill was $1,600. Nate tried to haggle. The guy walked away. By August, the main house was a mess. Nate and Chloe's Airbnb plan stalled. Zoning wouldn't allow short-term rentals without upgrades they couldn't afford. Tom's emails got sharp. "You're being selfish, Ethan." I replied, "I'm being a tenant." Diane left voicemails. "You're breaking Sarah's heart." I listened once, then deleted them. Sarah stopped texting. I saw her in the yard staring at the cottage like it was a stranger. I found the new place, a one-bedroom above a bookstore in Selwood. $1,400 a month. Small, but clean. The landlord, an old guy named Carl, said, "No drama here." I signed a lease. Hand steady. Back at the cottage, I packed methodically. 6 boxes one day, 4 the next. I found the notebook with Nate's IUs. $2,000, $500, $300. I tore out the page, then taped it back. Let it go, I told myself. The reinspection failed again. The drain line was fixed, but the attic mold spread. The inspector gave Nate 10 days or a $500 fine. Nate cornered me in the driveway. "You knew about the mold," he said, accusing. "I told you last year." I said, "Check my texts." He didn't have it come back. Tom tried one last time. "We can work this out. Ethan, stay. Help us." I said, "Email me." He didn't. Sarah called the night before I moved. "I didn't think it would go like this," she said. "You chose Nate." I said, "You all did." She cried again. I said, "I love you, but I'm done carrying everyone." She hung up. I packed my last box, a lamp I'd rewired. On October 31st, I loaded a U-Haul. Nate stood on the porch, arms crossed. "You're really going?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Good luck with the house." He didn't answer. The new apartment smelled like old books and cedar. I set up a folding table, bought a plant, named it Carl after the landlord. I walked to a coffee shop each morning with a barista. Jen learned my order. Black, no sugar. Work picked up. The crew got a contract for a restaurant remodel. I opened a savings account, $100 a week, labeled Future. My phone buzzed less. Sarah sent one text, a photo of the cottage empty. "It's weird without you." I didn't reply. Nate's Airbnb never launched. The mold remediation cost $3,200. Tom emailed once. "We thought this was best for the family." I wrote back, "I thought so too." He didn't respond. Closure isn't a fight or a hug. It's knowing which cost to skip, which doors to lock. I'm Ethan, 34, a carpenter with a lease and a life that's mine. I build what I want now.